You're listening to Mission Eve, a podcast that explores the stories of women who are opening the frontier of space to humanity. Your host is Megan Crawford, managing partner of Space Fund, a venture capital firm investing in the space industry. She is a mother, volunteer, founder, and true believer in humanity's future in space. Mission Eve is meant to inspire the girls of today who will be the women of tomorrow, leading our first permanent off-world settlements. Space needs women. Space needs you.
Welcome to Mission Eve. I'm your host, Megan Crawford, and I am thrilled to have with me as my guest today, Debbie Tomek. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thrilled to have you. So let's start at the beginning. Tell me where you were born, where you grew up, and whether that influenced you into getting into space.
So actually, my childhood was very influential in what I'm doing today. And where I was born, though, was Washington, D.C. You don't meet too many people born in the D.C. area, so I found that's quite an oddity. My father had done some of the early telemetry work for the Apollo program. So he was involved in that. Of course, when I was little, I had no idea, but I was still around a little bit of that community. He left government. We moved to Florida when I was really young. So really probably one of the bigger influencers were watching launches from Cape Canaveral at the time and Kennedy Space Center. And I remember watching those as a kid. And this is where it's going to make me even more odd. So I pretty much announced to my whole family when I was 5 that that's what I'm going to do. I'm like, that's it. So you can imagine the reaction. You know, I'm a young little blonde girl in the, 70s. It's like, sure, yeah good luck with that. It's here's your Barbie doll. So It was just a different, it was a different journey than I think women today, which is great, right? I like to see how we've progressed in that. But for me, it was exciting. I've got memories of watching those launches from our roof of our house and seeing, of course, I didn't know what was going up, right? All I knew is that's what I want to do.
Right.
And so I pretty much, having decided that when I was young, I did not deviate from that too much, which makes me even more of an oddity. I just kind of knew, to me, it was a little bit of a calling. I can't describe it. I don't know why. It was just there. And I just followed that journey.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. It's that little kind of ache in your heart, right? Where you know, that's where you need to be, right?
Yep.
I'm familiar with the feeling.
It is hard to describe.
Can you think of any maybe defining moments in your childhood or any specific people? You talked about your dad having some connection, but was there anything specific in your childhood that really stands out that helped get you to that surety that you were going to be in this industry?
Yeah. Well, a supportive family, but of course, back in that time frame, like I had said, it was. It was different, right? It was cute that's what I wanted to do.
Nobody took you seriously.
Yeah. It wasn't a disrespect thing. That's just not, in the 70s and 80s, it still just was not common for women to do that. So kind of folding into high school, probably a moment that always sticks with me was, I had a physics teacher, so Dr. Maiko, and that was just, loved that class, loved the math. Makes me even weirder, right? I liked the math. But he was very influential in the sense that I think he instilled in me a confidence that I could do this, because little did I know that the journey ahead of me with college and graduate school, that I would be one of the only women all the time for a long time. And not that I'm complaining about that. It just creates a different environment.
Right.
And so I think there's, from a confidence standpoint, sometimes you're like, oh, can I do this? Am I supposed to be here? So he was very influential to me. And then he took us on a class field trip to see a shuttle launch. So in the 80s.
Wonderful.
And I've got a picture. It's a cool one. I keep it on my desk at home. Somebody took it. It was candid. And it's really interesting that they have this picture of me, because I'm looking off into the horizon at the launch pad and somebody just caught it. I didn't know they were taking it. But I remember that moment. And I remember looking around Kennedy Space Center and I thought, this is it. This is exactly what I'm going to do, and this is where I'm going to work. So it's kind of neat, because very rarely does somebody have a picture of that moment. My mom found it years later. I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember that moment. And so Dr. Maiko, the field trip, and that just is, to me, emphasizes the importance that teachers and adults and the influence that we have over whether it's young girls or young boys and the difference that we can make in their lives. Because at that point forward, I'm like, oh yeah, this is game on. I'm doing this. So I never looked back.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So, did you ever get a chance to so you got this great opportunity to watch these launches all the time, but did you ever go to space camp or did you ever do any of those kind of things as a kid?
I didn't. Those just weren't opportunities that were readily available back then. I mean, I'm making it sound like it's the 1800s, right? I mean, it was, the late 80s, early 90s, but still it wasn't as prevalent and it just wasn't as, as normal for women to be interested in that. And so I didn't do any kind of space camps. We made all kinds of trips over to Kennedy Space Center and visited all of the, everything they've got there now. So that was kind of, for me, it was a little bit of a different journey. I loved that area, but there wasn't much that I could access, right? There wasn't, there was no precedence, right? There wasn't like there were women ahead of me that had done this or even males. I mean, my father had done that, but he had left for private industry.
Right.
So it was just, for me, it was a lot kind of carving my own path, and not that that's a bad thing. But I love seeing today the younger generation and the fact that I love being able to help where I can. It's important to me because I didn't have that. And again, that's not a complaint. It's just, you kind of just do it, right? You don't think about it. But no space camps. I'm wondering if we can go back as adults because I'd still love to do that.
I would love to go.
I know. But I do have to say that working at NASA, sometimes it's like space camp every day. So this is exaggeration. We got bad days too. But having worked Space Shuttle program, I've worked a lot of amazing things for this agency. And it's one of those things I look at where I am in my life right now. And I kid you not, it's like a pinch me kind of career. I'm like, wow, am I really doing this? And so for me, it's I get a lot of fulfillment out of what I do.
Wonderful. And, Good. Do you, so you said that you always knew that you wanted to do space, but did you know what profession you wanted to be? Did you decide you were going to be an astronaut or did you want to be a rocket scientist? Or when you were young, did you have any indication of kind of what actual job you wanted in the space industry?
Yes and no. So because it is very broad.
Right.
I just remember I wanted to work for NASA. So whether it was an astronaut, whether it was, working as a researcher, right? I hadn't really thought through all of that. But, one thing that I had done along my journey, heading off to college was I had the opportunity to co-op and do internships with private industry, and they rotate you around in different arenas.
Right.
And I think when you do, whether it's, working as an aerodynamicist in wind tunnels, whether it was working aeroacoustics, working jet noise problems, experimental, computational fluid dynamics, you kind of rotate around different areas. And you kind of start to learn what you like and what you don't like. And my experiences were that to me, it was more important finding out what I didn't like. To me, that's just as important as finding out what you do like. And so I get that question a lot too from folks that I mentor. Like, how did you know? And I'm like, you don't, but that's okay.
Yeah, you got to try things.
I know, and don't stress about it because you kind of just go out, then you do the next thing. And the way that my journey, a lot of people ask me too, they're like, well, how did you get where you got? And it's not like I sat down when I was 18 and charted this all out.
Right.
I can honestly say, as cliche-ish as it sounds, right? I kind of really have always just followed my passion in my heart, right? To me, those are kind of the motivators, and that sounds so silly, right? But for me, it was just NASA and the government has given me opportunity to take jobs where, I brought a lot of passion to it, and I've, felt like that this is where I kind of needed to be type of thing. Now there's been ones that haven't, been so great, right? But that's where you learn what doesn't work for you and what does work for you, and you pick those skills up all along. And so kind of my journey has been, it's not a ladder, right? It's more kind of like a jungle gym, right?
Yeah.
The way that you because a lot of times you're going lateral, but you end up doing something that's just, you're like, wow, I never would have saw myself here, but I love this. So it's been an interesting ride so far.
Well, good. And I'm going to poke at some more details of that ride here in a minute as we go. So tell me about college. What did you study? How long did it take you to figure out what you wanted to study? Did you have a couple different majors? Tell me about what interested you and got you excited in college.
So my undergrad, I went to Auburn University and studied aerospace engineering there in my undergrad. So the aerospace engineering was just the logical choice, right? I kind of, there was no internet when I was in high school, right? I mean, we got all that after the fact, and then in college, right, is when all that started. So it's not like I could sit there and go Google, what major do I major in to work at NASA, right? That kind of thing. But, aerospace was just kind of the default. They had a great program there at Auburn. And so I took that path with aerospace engineering, my undergrad, and then went on and did my master's in aeronautical and mechanical engineering. There was a time frame there, though, because I don't want to make it sound like, I knew what I was going to do when I was 5. I'm done. Boom, did it, right? It's not like there weren't moments there of like, is this really where I belong kind of thing. Because there's, you're always riddled with self-doubt at that age, right? I wish I could tell myself, stop, right? I want to go back and talk to myself. And actually, I keep that in mind when I mentor other students. I can touch on that later. But, I kind of vacillated a little bit. Do I go mechanical engineering? Do I do electrical? Do I do something more general? And I actually changed my major once to mechanical engineering from aerospace because the market was so up and down. I thought, well, gosh, I'm going to graduate. I worked my way through school. I'm one of 8 kids. And so it was scholarships and working, double jobs and co-oping. So could I do this today with tuition rates? Probably not. It was doable back then. But that was hard, right? I mean, that was hard to do. But I switched to mechanical. So I thought, well, gosh, I need to graduate. And I need to be sure that I'm going to get a job. The aerospace industry can be, up and down a lot. I did that for a semester, and I'm like, my heart just was not in it. And I switched back to aerospace. I thought, well, you know what? I'm taking my chances. And here I am. So, and it ended up being a good choice. I think that's why I always tell everybody just to kind of, follow, again, I hate to say follow your passion. I need to find a different word. But it's just kind of that inner voice. I feel like that all of us can guide us right in the direction and where we're supposed to be. And it has worked well for me.
Why do it if you're not interested in it, right?
You're right. I can't imagine waking up every morning and not having a job that I love. So, and I don't want to make it sound like I walk in with a super smiley face every single day, right? NASA still work, super cool to work for, but it's, we still have our, sides that are parts of it that are hard, like any job.
Yeah. Okay. So after graduate school, right? So you've got this aerospace engineering master's degree, you're ready to go. How did you get into the industry? What was your first job? How'd you find it? How'd that go? Yeah,
mine was like a little bit different. It wasn't it was straight to graduate school from undergrad, but it got a little bit, a sporty path after that. When I had finished my undergrad, I actually, it was exciting because I'd already gotten considerable offers from companies. It was very exciting, but it was one of the things, well, gosh, I really felt like I needed to, again, get my master's. So I headed to Georgia Tech. And I was there studying at Georgia Tech. And oddly enough, I had gone to a conference, and there was I was about a year in at Georgia Tech, and there was an advertisement for a job at NASA. I'm like, well, you know what? It's NASA, right? I at least need to try it, right? What do I have to lose? So I went ahead and applied, and it was in the particular area that I was kind of focusing in at that time, the aerodynamics and aeroacoustics. So I went ahead and applied, and at that point, I got the job with them. At the time, it was with a NASA contractor. I only ended up being with them for a certain number of years because then they picked me up as a civil servant and a NASA employee. But what they did is they offered me a position that enabled me to finish my master's program while working for them.
Wonderful.
So I actually went up there, George. I finished that. Then I did, completed the rest of it at George Washington University while up there at NASA Langley. So It was one of those just, big doors turn on small hinges. If I hadn't gone to that conference and hadn't seen the postings, because, back then there was no monster.com. There was no indeed.com with job postings, right? They were all done just on boards.
Right,
at AAA conferences. And if I had not seen that, so that took me to NASA Langley at that juncture. And I've been with the agency for 21 years now.
Wow. So you kind of went straight into it. Yeah.
I did. Yeah. I went straight into it. And I finished my master's while working for them. So that was an opportunity I'm very grateful for. It took a little bit longer than me just finishing it straight out. But when you mix that the studying with the actual hands-on work, because I ended up turning into an experimentalist researcher type, working in the wind tunnels, doing testing on a lot of our space vehicles and aerodynamic vehicles and planes for the military. And that hands-on experience coupled with what you're learning book-wise, to me, that brought it all together for me.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. So tell me about that first job. You were telling me about it a little bit. You got these wind tunnels and you're testing different stuff. So what was the kind of day-to-day for that? What did that look like?
My very first job, of course, coming to Langley, it was, it's nothing but wind tunnels. It gets more than that, right? But that's just really what impressed me. And I hired in with our facilities branch, a research facilities branch. So I was actually responsible for formulating and pulling together and managing these large wind tunnel tests, either working with Boeing, Lockheed Martin, working with internal programs like the X-33 program, that was Lockheed and NASA, testing different vehicles aerodynamically within these wind tunnels. And so it was literally working with model technicians, doing design cycles on the wind tunnel models, building them themselves, and then actually taking the data and analyzing it after the fact, and then making improvements upon it. And so it's kind of exciting. We recently had a launch. It's called the Ascent Abort 2 system. It was a test of our launch abort system that we had in summer of 2019, this past summer. And to me, that was a culmination of many years of research within wind tunnels for me, because things that we see on the launch pad, or we see things flying that, whether it's an airplane that you take at Christmas to go see your family, all the research and the things that go towards that have been done for years and years ahead of time. And so for me to see that at the launch pad and have successful flight test, I think back like, holy cow, I was working on that 11 years ago, right?
Wow,
in a wind tunnel.
yeah.
And I remember all the different designs that we had to do to finally get to that final design locked in. And to see that test successfully was just one of those moments where we were like, wow, right? We did that, right? And it was a launch abort system. So of course it was carrying crew back safely,
right?
In the event of an anomaly during launch. And I think that's near and dear to all of our hearts, because we have, the most recent, Columbia is the most recent disaster for us. And then most of us remember Challenger as kids. So yeah, it was really rough, but so exciting. So that, I kind of became a wind tunnel rat, is what they tell you. So I will always be an experimentalist at heart. It was so funny that I loved being in there, turning wrenches, being part of it, and so much so that the technicians that I worked with, I was stealing all their tools, right? They're like, you're an engineer. We're supposed to be doing all, but I wanted to be in it. So they presented me with my own, hot pink toolbox.
Awesome.
Painted pink. It had all my tools, and they're like, these are yours. Do not touch ours. And it's so funny because I don't even like the color pink, but they thought that was even funnier that they did that. But yeah, so I was kind of coined the tunnel rat, because I just loved being in there doing that work with them. So those were good times. So
then where'd you go from there? How long were you a wind tunnel rat?
I was a wind tunnel rat, right? I get a hat for that. I did that for, probably a good 10, 11 years. And to me, the experience that I pick up there too, and this is kind of what I tell, younger folks that I mentor, right? Just dig in like that in your career, because you may be putting in long hours. You may be, working a graveyard shift and either in a wind tunnel or doing a flight test somewhere or sitting behind a computer analyzing computational data. But that you pick up the skills and the foundation that you need. I think that bolsters you later in your career and enables you, if you want to move into leadership or managerial, right, to have that. Because I now manage people like me back then, right, with the organization I'm leading now. And I feel like I can still relate to that, right? I know what it's like to have that stress of the wind tunnel tests. I know what it's like to, have to hit deadlines, right? And so a lot of that I think makes, I can relate. And I'd like to think that makes me a better leader of these folks, having brought that, experience and that base with me. But I did that for about 10 years and then started migrating, jumped into the Space Shuttle program, which was definitely just an amazing experience, working that program towards the end of it. And then I had moved into management and leadership from that point on.
And so tell me about that transition, right? So you're used to kind of being down there, getting your hands dirty, and then now all of a sudden you're managing people. That's that's a pretty big difference. How did we get there?
Very different than managing air molecules flying over a wind tunnel model. Very different. Right. Well, I'm glad you asked that question because I'm probably not much different than a lot of folks in that sense that I don't want to say I went reluctantly. It was just, do I really want to stop doing research and the experimentalist type of work? Because I loved it, right? Again, it was like, holy cow, look what I'm working on here. I enjoyed all of that. But actually that launch I had talked about earlier with the ascent abort and the launch abort system, we were wrapping up a lot of the experimental research on that. We had developed a large portion, had delivered a large portion of the air database. It was ready to go. They were moving into the different parts of that project, right? The production and getting it ready for launch. So an opportunity came up. I was offered a project management position running a small research group that was trying to capture imagery of the space shuttle during reentry and where that research was born. And I had worked with these people as experimentalists before looking at aerothermal effects on space vehicles. But where it really clicked in was after the Columbia accident. So after the Columbia accident, and even before, there was, we knew there was damage on the heat shield. And, so of course that hit home with all of us. Right. A lot of us knew people on there, knew the crew. But a lot of us, it hit especially hard because we felt like we didn't know enough about the damage on that heat shield to have made a well-informed decision on it. And so moving past that, not something we ever want to happen again, but Langley had spun up a small team to look if there was a way that we could capture thermal imagery and know, really simply put, right, what the temperatures are on that heat shield during reentry coming in at Mach 22, right? What kind of temperatures is it experienced? And is the damage bad enough, right, that we either need to keep them on orbit and do a rescue mission, right, and make that determination, or the damage is minimal enough that we can bring them back in, but still have an idea? Because we don't quite at those kind of high speeds coming in from space and entry interface. We don't. All the flow physics, there's still elements there that we don't fully understand because it's very hard to recreate those speeds. Terrestrial and ground-based, and we can do some of them, right? We've got aeroballistic ranges, we've got high-speed wind tunnels, but nothing like in the full scale that can completely mimic. That's why flight testing is the holy grail, right? You want to be able to have that flight test data, but you don't want to get flight test data when you're carrying crew, right? Or cargo. But so what we did is we spun up a team, and they asked me to lead this team that captures imagery on the space shuttle, and so I went and moved into this management realm, but to answer your question fully, I told them I'll give it a year. I'm going to give it a year because I don't want to leave research yet. Like I wasn't quite sure. Right. And then, make a long story a little bit shorter, after that year working this program, it became apparent to me what I had said earlier, that the foundation that I had experimentally and from a research standpoint enabled me to, I think, connect with the teams and then learn how to lead. But that was definitely a transition for me to go from research into managing teams, and then especially in the Space Shuttle program and being responsible for data collection during a shuttle mission. So that was a lot of growth for me during that time. Good. Exciting time in that with that project.
And then tell me a little bit about what it is you're doing today.
Today, now I am Deputy Director. It's called the Space Technology and Exploration Directorate at NASA Langley. So what we do, NASA Langley, the core of our work is really we're a research and development lab, R&D type of federal lab. But technology development really is at our core. So it is that types of things when I was alluding to earlier about things that you may see 10 years from now, is stuff that my teams are working on right now. Right? Whether it be Mars entry systems, whether it be instrumentation that's going to Mars, whether it be things deeper in the solar system, whether it be infrastructure to do site development on the surface of the moon, it's you name it, whether it's building large aperture telescopes. And so we enable with our technology development a lot of those type of capabilities and technologies that take us further and deeper into the solar system. And that's where that's the very cool side of my job. So even though I'm not like in it anymore, or not in the teams, but being able to lead, I see myself in a, it sounds like I'm trivializing it, but it's an enabling position, right? I need to do whatever I need to do, whether it be resources, whether it be, working, interfacing with headquarters, external stakeholders to enable our teams to be able to free them up to do the kind of work. People did that for me when I was in research, and I didn't have to worry about it, right. And so for me, I'm kind of paying it forward to the people that are in our organization.
So, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to break into this industry, who's coming from outside, who has had no idea how to get in? What would you tell them?
I have a lot of different ways that I can answer that. But I would think probably the one thing I tell folks the most when they ask me that is, I guess, don't underestimate themselves in going forward. Don't second guess yourself. There have been plenty of times where I have hesitated to do something because I was I feared doing that, or felt like I didn't have the confidence. And, stepping, to the side a little bit and making this more about women, we have a tendency to think, well, I'm not ready for that. I need to wait until I'm ready. And I'm like, no, do it. Right? Do it, because you learn while you're doing, right? You don't have to be an expert at everything. And I'll give you an example where I had I had many examples, right? The ones during the Space Shuttle program and us being able to do the impossible, right? We were literally laughed at, and the people at Mission Control that were already there, like, who's this crazy research team from Langley, right? And what do they, what do they really think that they're going to be able to catch data on something coming in at 144,000 feet going Mach 22? Yeah, and guess what? We not only did it once, but we went on to do it 7-8 times for the whole remaining shuttle program, right? So we became kind of like the rock stars of Mission Control after that, which was cool. But, we knew, right? But it was like, oh, holy cow, what are we doing here, right? But you kind of just, you take that next step and you do it, and don't let kind of fear or lack of confidence to ever hold you back. I wish somebody had told me that more when I was younger, because I think we just, we stay inside our heads so much, and we think through, we overthink. We're like, oh, I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't do that. Right. And when I'm mentoring people, I one thing I keep in my head is I try to be who I felt I needed back at that age. Right. And I didn't necessarily have all kinds of role models. Right. I've had amazing ones since. Right. But always probably, college or early career, there weren't a whole lot of other women doing what I did. And I still worked with amazing gentlemen. Right. But the mentorships there were a little bit more challenging because there weren't as many women. But so for me, I try to offer that back to the younger generation, and to really just kind of challenge and look, whatever fears you've got, in the face, and just do it.
Wonderful. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I had same thing looking back on my life. I can think of so many times where I hesitated, or I didn't take that leap because of my own lack of confidence. And the older I've gotten and the more confident I've gotten, the more often I take those steps, and it builds on itself, and it starts to spiral in such a positive way when you just kind of jump in there and do it. So I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
And you're going to be uncomfortable too. I tell people that. And I have these leadership tenets that I keep. One of a great mentor that I had encouraged me to start putting those together, about 5 or 6 years ago, and up to like 9. But one of them is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And the reason that's one of my leadership tenets is because the biggest turning points in my career and in my life and in my journey have been when I've chosen to step out of that, comfort zone, right? Again, another cliche word, but when you get comfortable with being uncomfortable, to me, those were the biggest pivotal moments in my life. If I had not chosen to take that step off that cliff, what looked like was going to be, a long drop. If I had not done that, I look back and thinking, oh my gosh, I never would have never would have done the Space Shuttle program, right? There's so many different things I never would have had experienced in my journey if I hadn't decided to have done that. And it gets easier with age. That'd be like my advice too, to tell the younger folks, right? You get more comfortable with being uncomfortable, and you get,
I don't know if it's age as much as experience, right?
And I think it's a little bit of both. You just get more, I don't want to call it fearless, right? I think we're still rational and try to make good decisions, but you get more comfortable with that, I think, with the age and the experience, and especially when you've had success. And it's not that I've not fallen on my face plenty of times, but again, those were some of the bigger learning moments too. You get back up, you dust your hands off, and you keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you faced any challenges that you think are kind of unique to being in the space industry? How is space, uniquely challenging or different, and how have you dealt with that?
Challenge-wise, I can deconstruct this in a couple different ways and answer your question in different ways. I know a lot of people do get the question a lot has it been more difficult because I'm a female in there? That's hard to say because I don't have a parallel path to have said it would have been easier if I made these different choices.
Right.
I would be amiss, though, if I didn't say that it has not presented quite a bit of challenges. And now being in the position that I'm in, I look back and there are plenty of times where I felt like I should have spoken up more about something. I should have taken a stand on it. But when you're younger, you feel like, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to be labeled this. I don't want to be labeled that. I feel like I did a disservice during those times, not kind of speaking up. So now I do. And I feel like if I cannot help empower them and I cannot make a stand, then who's going to do it, right? Who's going to stand up? And I don't want to make it sound like it's been there's been, horrible circumstances, but there has been, quite a few instances, being a female in this industry that have made it very challenging. And now I feel like I try to look out for others in that sense. Will it change anytime soon? Probably not.
You don't think it's getting better over time?
It is getting better, but I think it's
always going to be there.
It's a generational thing. And what I have found too over time is going through a lot of these, and I'm not going to go into details of my circumstances, but a lot of them are very similar to the things you're reading about in media, right? And you're reading all of them, right? All of us have those kind of experiences. I don't whine and complain, and I don't want to harbor on those as much as what I have learned is a large majority of mine have not come from a place of negative intent on the other individual's part. So there's a handful of them, absolutely, right? And those handled right away, and that is not standards of conduct of our agency or standards of conduct that I even subscribe to, right? Handled those very firmly. So I've kind of taken a new stance where, when incidences occur that are either look like extreme bias or even discrimination, it's, to me, I evaluate I try to understand more, right? Is this coming from a place of negative intent or positive intent? That's very important to me. And that's a huge difference because in how you approach it. Because to me, I have found I've had greater success when I help educate the person on what they may have just said to me or their behavior being inappropriate. And I tell you, 99% of the time, the response is like, holy cow, I didn't even realize that what I was saying was offensive. And so again, that's like the unconscious bias type part where people will make comment. I'll give you an example where I was coming off the Space Shuttle program, I was asked to run the space radiation program, and it was try to harness, space radiation was one of our biggest hurdles in long
Keeping
duration
humans alive.
in space. And we needed to get better at integrating that across the whole agency. So I was standing up this team across the whole agency from every single center and even headquarters. We'd had tons of telecons, online talking, we're going this direction, but I had my first all hands with everybody at Langley. And we walk in and I was in this big conference room, and I, walk in, coming in from a different meeting. Everybody was there from all over. They'd never met a chunk of these except for online. And I sit down at the head of the conference table, and there was a gentleman to my right. So a gentleman from a different center, I won't name any names. And he leans in and he whispers to me, he goes, "I am so sorry, but that's the program manager's seat. You might want to go sit back against the wall if you're taking notes." Ooh. And so my team that was around me, they're ducking. They're like, "Oh no, she's gonna blow. She's gonna blow." And I thought, okay, just take a deep breath. And I looked at him and I reached my hand out and I said, "Hi, my name's Debbie Tomek. I'm the program manager here." And he turned he was mortified, right? I just handled it calmly like that. And so I want to tell the end of the story, though, because I wanted to make sure that I finish on a positive note with that. He apologized and said, "Hey, I just didn't, I never should have done that," right? But, I asked him, I said, "What is it that made you think?" Clear wasn't a gender. He knew I was a female.
Right.
Right. And so he kind of just pondered it for a second and he looks at me. He says, "You just don't look like you're an engineering program manager. You just didn't look like one." I thought, well, what does that mean? I look like one because I am one, right? What does that mean? Right. But since that point, right, and at that moment, I could have gotten angry. I could have gotten angry with him in that conference room. I could have embarrassed him in front of that whole 50 people in that room. I didn't, because to me, it was more important to help him see that, blind spot that he had. And I tell you what, he went on to be one of my best employees on that project, right? And he, when he thanked me, he's like, "I don't know why." He was almost like, "Wow, I don't even know why." And so that's that unconscious bias. So to me, I have found a large percentage of the time it's that. Now, is it my job to help educate the world? All of that? No, right? But can I help in those isolated moments? Absolutely. Right. And so I could write a book on a lot of those. That's just one very small example.
No, I appreciate that. And as you said, we've kind of all had these experiences, right? So, and I agree with you completely that it's an opportunity for education in most instances, right? I really appreciate that. Yeah. So what does a deputy director do day to day? And kind of what comes next for you? Are you happy? Do you love your role? Are you looking to move up or do something else? Kind of tell me about the day to day and where you go from here.
Okay. All right. A lot in that question. I can answer it all.
Good.
So the deputy director position, I had touched on earlier how it's really just enabling our teams underneath. We do everything from building flight hardware that's going to launch to Mars next year, right? Which was incredibly exciting, to developing new entry systems that we can use on any kind of planetary surface, right? So we're developing flight hardware all the way over to the other side of the spectrum where we're doing research, right, on what's the new and up and coming things you guys won't know about for another decade or so, right? Because they're all still evolving. At the same time, we've got to manage the resources. We've got to manage the people, because none of this happens without the people, right? It really doesn't. And again, we say that kind of thing over and over again, but to me, taking care of your people and making sure that they have what they need to do their jobs, to me, is most important. And, it's amazing to me. I'm constantly amazed at what our people can accomplish with a lot of the times with what they balance, sometimes outside of their life. And I can't necessarily help them with that. I mean, you kind of turn into sometimes a counselor a lot too on that. And I think that's a role that you don't necessarily see until you do supervisory and you start leading people. But to me, making sure that our folks have what they need, we try to run an organization that is as transparent as possible too. Like if there's stuff going on and it's serious, and like if we've had leadership changes like we've had this past year, and the changes in the stand up of the Artemis mission, and we have a lot going on in our agency that can create a lot of anxiety in our employees. Everybody was furloughed earlier, in the year and early 2019. And so the anxiety that created, so a lot of that, it's learning how, part of leading people is, really kind of knowing how to take care of them too. Now, do we do it perfectly? No, but it's a lot of that. At the same time, it's enabling and getting the resources that we need to do this research and do the next great thing. I'll give a really good example too of a new emergent technology. It's called on-orbit servicing, assembly, and manufacturing, and that's a huge initiative that we are pushing forward now, and it's kind of being coming up out of Langley and with another center, Goddard Space Flight Center, we're working with on. And that's one that, you may have heard that for the first time in this particular conversation, but it is a particular area that people will be hearing about for years and years and years to come, because it has the ability to transform the way that we do all space architecture, the way that we do everything, by being able to assemble things and manufacture them in space versus having to fold them up in an origami fashion and then fit within a payload fairing size. So, I'll only touch on that example because it's a good one that emphasizes how we do everything from flight hardware to looking at what's that next great thing. Like what do we need? What do we need to keep humans safe in space? What do we need to enable site development on planetary surfaces, right? So we're kind of covering the gamut of all of that, from human exploration to the technology that we need to enable that.
Sounds so exciting. I mean, what a fun job to get to just sit around and talk about on-orbit servicing and manufacturing. I love that. I love that. And I'm super excited for that. So it's an area I've been watching very carefully personally because, for me, that seems to be the most important stair step between a LEO infrastructure of satellites and permanent human settlement. That on-orbit servicing and manufacturing to service LEO gives us that next step we need to start building outward. So for me, I'm really excited. So thank you for, for doing that.
And there's a lot going on in that area right now where we're actually harnessing expertise from across the nation on that. So we're getting smarter on how to integrate, and we're all stewards of taxpayer money anyways, right? Whether you work Department of Defense, whether you work for NASA. And so if all of us need that cross-cutting technology, right? Doesn't matter if it's OSAM, this on-orbit servicing, assembly, manufacturing, or whether it's hypersonics, we've, us learning how to work together across the whole of government really helps us propel these technologies further. That particular one, I agree with you, though, is incredibly exciting just because of how it transforms the way that we do everything. I tell everybody that, we've grown up in a generation where everything that we've done, all of our architecture, whether it's, rovers that we've got on Mars, whether it's the missions in the outer solar system, whether it's the space station up in LEO, whether it's satellites, it's all been designed around the mass and volume of payload fairing sizes. So our brains are in that shape. They're all shaped. And how do we change that? Right? I don't. What if I told you I could build you anything in space right now? Right? No limitation. It doesn't have to fit and fold into an origami type position within a payload fairing. So what does that enable? I can't. For me, I'm working the advanced concepts on that, but still, there's a part of me that I can't even envision. You can't, right? Yeah. And so once we kind of start taking those first steps into kind of the unknown of what this can enable, that's incredibly exciting, right? I mean, what if we could, manufacture materials that aren't possible for us to manufacture here because we live in a gravity well. But you get in microgravity, right? You could end up manufacturing materials that we can't even fathom right now, let alone what we can assemble up there that enables a sustained human presence in space. I've always been subscribed to the making us a multi-planet species. And I'm glad that that's a common comment now, right? I said that 10 years ago and people would look at me like I had 3 heads. And now it's like, and now y'all are getting it. So
yeah, thanks Elon.
Elon did coin that. Yeah.
I do appreciate that. So, and that was actually my next question was, kind of what's your vision for humanity's future in space?
Oh gosh, I want to see us out there. Right. And like I said earlier, a sustained presence in space. And, I know we've touched on the OSAM capabilities a lot, but I'll go back to that one just because of that enables us to not only, if we advance those capabilities, it not only enables us to have infrastructure up there that can sustain a human presence, but it actually pulls together all of those technologies that we've been working on for years to enable that we just haven't had this, game changing, this huge lever actually get to this point that enables that. So to me, I envision this whole ecosystem up there. Everything that we have here on Earth, I want it up there, whether it's on a planetary surface, whether it's on orbit, whether it's in cislunar space, it doesn't matter. I want to get to a point that we've got habitats up there. We have humans working and living in unison with, robots on different surfaces. I want to see us further into the solar system, going even further than even Mars. We're thinking, we just are working on a mission to one of the moons of Saturn called Titan, and we're sending a quadcopter there.
Titan copter.
Incredibly,
so excited.
Yeah, it is. But it's one of the ocean worlds, and so that is just opening up for us a whole different arena of what areas have what planets have the resources that we need, that we can harness, that can enable a human presence there. And I think of all of the science, I think of all of the learning, I think of how that opens up just the whole fathom of the solar system to us, right? You look how vast it is, and you look at us and we're like, just Earth is just little itty bitty, planet, right?
Yeah.
In this whole scheme of this massive universe. And I want to get out there. Right. And everything that we do is enabling that a little bit further every day.
And would you personally go?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, heck yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, I would do it. I'd have no problems at all going up.
So one last question. Are there anything outside of your job, any causes that you're passionate about that help kind of keep you fueled up so that you can go do this cool job every day?
That's a great question. I've touched on already the things that are more, my industry related type things. I love doing speaking events with kids or high school or early career kind of folks. I do a lot of mentoring, because I had mentioned earlier, right? I kind of want to be to other people what I felt like I needed at that age, and what they need, right? It's a different generation, right? So it's not exactly the same what I needed, but I feel like I want folks to learn from my journey, because as exciting as it has been, it was, it's still not been easy.
Right.
There was a lot of things I second guessed so much, right? I really, gosh, should I do this? I don't know. And for me to be able to help somebody work through that and get the confidence to kind of make a well-informed decision. So I get really excited about trying to, get that inspiration in younger folks, because to me that is that the generation coming up now, and even us, right? That it's mid-level folks. We are getting to a point that we are right at such an exciting time for space exploration. So many things are advanced. So many technologies are at that cusp. I tease folks, and I tease but not tease, right? That this reminds me of what the late 90s were with the .com. So now is it going to boom as quickly as terrestrial type computers? Probably not, right? But there's similarities there.
We're
from a metaphor.
at a tipping point. I believe that 100%.
At a tipping point. But for me too, outside of the gate at NASA, there's areas that I have a lot of passion around that have nothing to do with space.
Yeah.
And they're related about women empowering. I actually do a lot of work with human trafficking victims. And to me, they're kind of near and dear to my heart, because I look at what I'm so grateful for the things that I've been bestowed in my life. And even though I had to work very hard for them, right? I had to work my way through college. It was, I was the first female to graduate college in my family. It was, there's a lot of things that were firsts for me, but it's still, I feel like in a lot of ways, I did have opportunities that others maybe haven't had. And I look at that sector of our society and so much struggle and so much them not thinking that they have a future.
Yeah.
And so that is quite a dichotomy of where I am now, right? A lot of them, they don't even know what I do, right? They don't need to, right? But for me to make a difference in, a woman's life or a young girl's life that's going through something as horrific as that removal from this world, I think gives me a much different perspective when I come back into this. And I think I'd like to think it makes me a better person. I hope that I can counsel people better and lead people better, and be a better leader, not only for our government, but also personally for my family and my community.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Debbie. It's just been absolutely fascinating to hear about your journey and to learn your story. So thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate
welcome.
it.
Thank you. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Mission Eve is a production of the Center for Space, Commerce, and Finance, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to educating entrepreneurs and investors about their respective challenges and opportunities as it relates to space. Megan Crawford has been your host and executive producer. Aaron Pagel is the executive director for the center and producer and editor for this episode. Marketing and communications for Mission Eve is managed by Nikki Martinez. Theme music has been composed by Liz Fole. If you'd like to support this podcast, please visit patreon.com/missioneve to become a monthly subscriber. We have multiple tiers available with benefits like personalized thank yous, access to limited edition t-shirts, opportunities to engage with our interviewees via online Ask Me Anything sessions, and small group gatherings with Megan Crawford when available. Any support you can offer will go a long way to helping us continue to tell the stories of the women who are making life in space a reality. Please follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Center for Space Commerce and Finance, Twitter at CSCF_nonprofit, and LinkedIn at linkedin.com/company/CSCF. Thank you very much for listening.